Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Adoption Happy Hour brought to you by NAAP. We are the National Association of Adoptees and Parents, where it is our mission to unify the adoption community and elevate our diverse voices by promoting dialogue, understanding, and healing through education, awareness, and connections. I'm Marcie Keithley, your host for the evening, along with Jennifer Falsing in the Zoom room, and Beth is on her way to North Carolina on vacation. So we're excited to have you all this evening. I know we've got a few stragglers coming in. That's okay. But yeah, we're going to start off. Jennifer, you want to go over our announcements? Housekeeping items. Pull those up for me.
I am working on it. I'm trying to get it to open. There's something, I don't know what's going on. Sorry.
Yeah, we
Give me a
still got
second.
people
It's
coming
trying
in.
to open.
We're missing Beth tonight.
Oh, it's not opening. Hang on a second. Let me try again.
Fine.
I'm on a different computer and it's not playing nice. Try a different one here. Open. Kill it.
And you keep freezing.
There we
Jen.
go. Finally. Sorry about that. It was being silly.
You're at the lake, aren't you? Are you at home?
Yep. Oh no, I'm at the lake. Sorry about that. Okay. There we go.
Hey. Maybe. There we go. Okay, thank you. We just want to remind everyone this is a public meeting with no guarantee that information or identity is confidential. Portions of this event are recorded and may be shared on our private happy hour group on Facebook and on our YouTube channel. If you do not follow us on our private Facebook group, please do so. That's where Elizabeth's replay will be. Please remain on mute, raise your hand on screen or the virtual hand to be recognized. You may post your questions or comments in chat. If you are experiencing a serious mental health event or suicidal thought, please contact a licensed professional or the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline by dialing 988.
Okay, and this is a reminder of our upcoming programs. On the 25th, we have Migrating Towards Wholeness with Dr. Liz DeBetta. It's at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Our October first happy hour of October is on the 3rd at 7 p.m. and it's Jeff Forney, Coco Brush's son, if you know him or her, and he's going to be talking about the Innocent Project, Innocent People Project. So he's a photographer. He photographs people and then tells story, and he's going to have an art show someday with all this. And then on the 14th of October at 6 p.m., it's Putting Yourself Together After Reunion with Dr. Joyce McGuire Pavo. And then the second Thursday, it's not scheduled yet, will be First Families with Amy Seat, but she doesn't have that scheduled yet. But invitations have gone out to all those events. You can register on Eventbrite.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, anything else you have for us?
Well, I will just tell you that here is the next happy hour. Registration is live now, and I'll go ahead and drop the link in the chat.
Yeah, we met Jeff out in Denver.
Yep.
And untangling our roots. Yeah, that'll be a fun happy hour. He's an interesting guy. Okay, well, thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate that. Now, at this time, if you would please go ahead and join in the chat room and let everybody know where you're from and how you identify in the constellation for Elizabeth. And Elizabeth, are you there now? Where are you?
I am. I'm right here.
You're here. Welcome. Welcome to Happy Hour. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we want to tell the attendees a little bit about you. For those of you that don't know, Elizabeth. She is a reunited adoptee, an adoptive mom, and author who speaks on resilience and life sacred transitions. She's currently writing her third book, and we're going to learn more about that this evening too. So start off with, I need to let Murphy's going crazy over here. Sorry, guys. Elizabeth, I'm going to let you tell everybody a little bit more about yourself and your story and how you're working in the adoption community. So welcome. Did we freeze? Did we freeze? Am I back? Did you hear any of that? Okay. I'm just talking away. Welcome, Elizabeth, to Adoption Happy Hour. Sorry, these moments on Zoom. What are we going to do? It happens to us all. Welcome. We want everybody to go ahead and just mention about using the chat room and introduce yourselves, where you're from, and let Elizabeth know how you identify in the constellation. And Elizabeth, let's just go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about you. We know you're a reunited adoptee. You've got a book out. You've got another one coming, and just share a little bit of your story with us.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. It's so good to be here. I am a baby scoop era adoptee, born in 1970, reunited with my birth family in 1999, back before the days of the internet. So when I found my birth family, I found my birth mom, my birth dad, and 11 brothers and sisters. My first mom raised 3 children, and my first dad, he and his wife raised 8. So I have been to more graduations, weddings, births of babies. I think I have like 16 or 17 nieces and nephews, with a couple more on the way. It's been really insane, and it's been wonderful. I mean, it's been one of the greatest blessings of my life. And then 14 years ago, we adopted our daughter, Riley, who is now 14. And we were living in Florida at the time. And then during COVID in 2020, when everybody was sitting around in their homes bored, like, what are we going to do? Well, we did DNA testing and discovered that her biological dad was someone different than we had been told it was. So we had entered into our adoption as an open adoption, but after 2 years, her first mom, I don't know, I just think it was too painful for her. So she had dropped contact with us. But then when Riley was 9, we discovered her birth dad, and we've been in reunion with him for 5 years. So I have experience with kind of both ends, my own experience and then guiding a kiddo through it. So, and just to Marcie's point about my book, so what happened, so I'm just professionally, I'm a life and business coach. I've been an entrepreneur, a speaker, and author for 25 years, actually 25 years in August. And I outlined a book about adoption reunion back in 2005. And then I put it away for 20 years. And I was in a really, well, maybe not 20 years, 18 years. I was in a really bad car accident, had a near-death experience. It was a head-on collision about 2 years ago. And I was out of work for about 4 months. I had a really bad concussion, and I was really beat up from the wreck. And my birth mom had just died, like literally like 4 weeks before the car accident. And so I was in this deep grief place, and I'd had this car accident, and it just got really clear. It was like, all right, Elizabeth, you need to write the book. It's time. And so for the past year and a half, I have been interviewing people. I've interviewed about 51, 52 people for the book. I've interviewed adoptees, first and birth parents, adoptive parents, siblings. And so I think even an aunt or uncle as well. So I've been trying to get lots of different people. And, later on, I'd love to invite you all, if any of you are interested in being interviewed for the book, if you are experiencing reunion, whether it's good or bad or challenging or all the things, I'd love to hear your story. So that book has really led me on this incredible journey because I've connected with the adoption community. And I guess that's the other thing I should share. So back when I was doing my search in the late 90s, I was real involved in the adoption community. I don't know if any of you were around when the American Adoption Congress was alive and kicking. And so I was very involved in that organization. I spoke at several national conferences. I helped plan a regional conference for them in North Carolina in 2006, coached the board 1 year on their strategic plan. So I was very involved in the community, but then I stepped away for 15, 20 years. And so now I've been back in the community over the last year and a half as I've been writing this book. And I've just met so many wonderful people like Marcie and Jennifer, and all of the other just incredible organizations that are out there. And, the one thing I've realized as I've been interviewing folks for this book, one of the questions I asked them is, what kind of support did you have when you went through reunion? And because many of them are a little bit older or baby scoop era folk like me, there weren't, if you've been in reunion for 20 years or longer, there wasn't a lot out there. But now there are more and more resources, there are more and more groups, there's more and more books. And so I just want to continue to amplify those stories because reunion is really complex, as you may know, for those of you who have gone through it. So I'll stop talking for a minute. Marcie, is that what you were looking for in terms of an intro?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to dig down and learn a little bit more about you. And, I think this book is hugely going to be hugely popular, and we can't get enough reunion stories. And we know that, to your point, when you were talking about reunion being complex, it evolves and it changes and it's fluid and it changes all the time. So the more we can connect with others and share our stories of the ups and downs of reunion, I think puts us in a better place. So I'm looking forward to your book.
Oh, thank you. Well, and the one thing that I'm hoping that my voice, gathering the voices of all these people that I've talked with, is going to add to the literature is really a bit of a how-to. There's a lot of memoirs out there about reunion, and it takes us on the emotional journey, which is great. I mean, I've read so many memoirs and I love that. It's really valuable to sort of validate my own story. But there's so much about that. There's no roadmap. No one tells us how to do this. And we all kind of tend to go through it a little bit blindly and in a silo because we don't realize, oh my gosh, there's all these other people out there. So I'm hoping that with this book and with this information, we'll be able to give some people some practical steps and tools and questions and guides and exercises and reflection questions, all of that to support the journey.
Yeah, I know in my own personal journey, when I went in reunion with my daughter in 2008, I was just thinking, again, no roadmap. And because, again, what you just mentioned is that we didn't have any support back then. When you asked me that question, it was the same thing. I didn't have any support. Nobody didn't want to talk to me. They just wanted it to go away. They just wanted it, to pretend it didn't happen. So to have a roadmap is beneficial. And the thing that I didn't think about was the other people, the kept siblings, my mother, my father. And I don't think there's enough out there either. At least I haven't, to my knowledge, I haven't read a lot about that. And that's part of it. It's not just us, it's not just the adoptee and the first family. There's so much involved in that, other members. And we don't, at least I didn't, with my daughter. I remember having that conversation with her when she said, Mom, she goes, you didn't even ask me how I felt about finding my sister. You didn't even tell me you were going to do it. So I wasn't thinking about her because I was so caught up in I found my daughter. I was going to make this right. It was going to be perfect. Right.
It's
So
so
I think,
true.
so books like yours that have different, by interviewing over 50 people and hearing these different stories and how they all interconnect and how each one of us made it through or didn't is beneficial.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. I had a chance at one of the American Adoption Congress conferences. It would have been 2002, 2003, something like that, when Betty Jean Lifton was still alive. And I had a chance to meet her and talk with her. I attended one of her sessions, and she used the phrase, and I'm not sure that she's the one who initially said it, but I've always associated it with her. She talked about the fourth side of the triangle, which is what you were just talking about. It's all the other people. You're right, we don't think about that. But what I'm also noticing, one of the things I did with my book is I interviewed my siblings. So 9 out of the 11 gave me their time and their input. And I think the other 2 would have, they just, they've got kids and busy lives and whatever. But it was really interesting to hear some of their perspectives that I had never heard before. Because I'd never asked the question. And then they started asking me things like, well, what was your growing up? And we didn't really even ask you about you. We just kind of thought, oh, here's this new person in our lives. And so, yeah, so there's so many layers, so many layers.
So many layers. And when do you think the book will be completed and will be ready?
That's a great question. My first 3 chapters are due to my editor next week. So, I have a proposal written. So I'm hoping by next year. I do have a hybrid publisher. So the publisher of my second book has expressed interest in it. But if I could get an agent and, get a bigger publishing house, I might go for that. But we'll see. I haven't figured that out. So if anybody here has any, contacts in the literary world, I'd love to talk to you.
We're always looking for that. And that industry's changed so much. That keeps changing every year too.
Well, it really does. And I loved the hybrid publisher that I worked with for my Sacred Celebrations book, which is all about rituals. And they were wonderful to work with. So I could go with them, but I'd love if there's someone who's focused on these kinds of issues, I think it would give it maybe a little more bigger profile. So we'll see.
You want to talk a little bit about rituals?
Sure. Yeah.
Share that with us.
We can do that. Well, okay. Can I do a shameless plug? Then I got the book right here.
Of course. That's what I was waiting for.
Okay, thank you. So it's called Sacred. The book is called Sacred Celebrations, and it's designing rituals to navigate life's milestone transitions. And you can get it on Amazon and at Bookshop. You can get it on my website, either elizabethbarbour.com or sacredcelebrations.com. And I'll put my contact info in the chat later. The book is not specifically about adoption, but there are some adoption related rituals in here. I think, just sharing from my own personal experience of ritual as it relates to adoption, really honoring the big milestones and the transitions, and doing it in a very sacred way. When I first met my birth family, and particularly my birth mom, we knew how important it was that we were, someone had given us the advice that, you don't have any history together. So suddenly you're strangers, but you're family, right? It's like the both and, like you're family, but I have no idea who you are. You're a total stranger, but
intimate strangers.
Intimate strangers. Yes, exactly. So it's this idea of how can we create history together? And so it was one of the best pieces of advice we got. They said, be really intentional about doing things that are special and unique together. So like, don't just get together and, go have lunch and go shopping or whatever. Like go have experiences together. And so over the years, my birth mom, her name is Kathy, she and I made a point to have some really big rituals on those big anniversaries. So for our 10 and our 20-year reunion, we went and we did these big trips together. And it was literally the only 2 times in the 24 years before she died that we were alone, just the 2 of us. Because, there were always, her husband or my kid or my other siblings or whatever, so we were always trying to do stuff with everybody. But to have that sacred time, just the 2 of us, was just so very, very precious. In terms of other rituals, I guess, since I'm talking about her, I'll keep talking about her for just a minute. So when she passed away 2 years ago, very unexpectedly, She was only 72, and she and her husband got COVID and pneumonia and died within 10 days of each other. So he died first at home and she witnessed it. And then she was hospitalized 2 or 3 days later and passed away. So it was this really traumatic experience, as you might imagine. But it was, getting emotional. I was thinking about it. It was so full of love and grace. Like she called each one of us kids home, and we were all together with her when she died. And it was just this really beautiful time of honoring her. And in fact, I'll share this story because it was just so poignant. So she was on a respirator, and she had to make the decision to tell the hospice people, okay, you got to turn it off. Like she had to be that brave. It was insane. And so she finally had said, okay, I'm ready. And so we kids were like, okay, like whatever you want, mom. And then she said, no, wait, I'm not ready. She said, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. She gave my brother a list of like 30 people. And she said, I want to see all these people. Y'all, the next day, that morning, probably 25 of the 30 were able to make it. And in fact, some of them drove like 2 to 3 hours across the state of Florida to come see her. And one by one, each person and each family group came in to say goodbye to her. It was so magnificent. So that when she was done, it was like she was holding court. She was kind of like a queen. And she was very queenly. And at one point, I'll never forget, we were all checking in. We're like, are you okay, mom? And at one point, she just kind of like waved us all away. Like, go away. Like, leave me alone. And it was just so funny because like that was her personality. But after she had received all of those people, she was ready. And she said, okay, I'm ready now. And so then it was just us kids and her, and she was able to let go. That ritual was something you could never plan, but it was so powerful. And I made sure that after she died and each one of my siblings left the room, I made sure I was the last one, because in the beginning it was just her and I, you know. And wow, I haven't talked about this in a really long time. I was not planning on talking about this. Marcie.
Oh,
But it's just that that to me felt like such a sacred ritual, to honor and be with her as she was leaving, just as she, was the one who brought me in. So that's my personal story there. But there's lots of other ways ritual can apply when you're experiencing reunion. Whether it's in the form of, I'll give an example of my daughter and her birth dad. On one of our visits a couple years ago, he's a guy who likes bling, and he always has like, cool shoes and cool clothes, and he wears jewelry and bracelets and whatever. And so he had this really thick silver bracelet, and he bought one for her, and he calls her Little Nugget. He's like, hey, Little Nugget, even though she's 14 now. And he said, I want you to have this so that we can have this together. Again, just, like a simple thing, but very powerful and symbolic, because he said, I want something that will connect the two of us. So gifts can be really good rituals. Spending intentional time together, doing the same thing year after year. Maybe it's celebrating the first phone call or the first meeting or, the first whatever, and making those events sacred and really honoring those.
wow. It's beautiful. I'll have to read the book. I haven't read the book. So
Okay.
yeah, I'll have to share more of that with us.
Thank
Is
you.
anybody in any of our attendees, can relate to what Elizabeth just shared? And if you have any ritual, or was there any defining moment for you? If you want to put that in the chat room and share that with the group, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. I'd love to talk, if we can, about the grace method that I am developing for people in reunion. Is that okay? To switch to that? Okay. Oh wait, okay, before I move to that though, I just want to read, I just saw the chat in here. Yes, thank you, Susan. That is very meaningful for them. And Teresa says, my sister and I met on Leap Day. So you celebrate your sisterversary every year. I love that. Your sisterversary. That's great. That's so good. Yeah. Okay, so let's I want to introduce this concept of navigating reunion with grace, and then would love to open it up to your thoughts and impressions. So, as you all know, if you have experienced reunion, whether it's been good and long term, or whether it's brand new, or maybe you haven't, or you have and it's been really challenging and hard, and maybe it didn't last, maybe there was initial contact or maybe a few visits and then, that stopped. It's really challenging. I mean, they call it the reunion roller coaster for a reason. And even when it's good, it's still really complex and layered. So I really feel like we have to give grace in reunion. We need to give grace to ourselves, and we need to give grace to the people that we're connecting with. And so I've been working on this for the past year or so, developing this framework, and so I'd love to share it with you. And I'll tell you the 5 words, and then I'll go through and sort of explain each one. So G stands for Genesis, or the beginning. The R is for reconnection. The A is for authenticity. The C is for communication. And the E is for evolution. So where I go with that. So Genesis, beginning. It's not just about the beginning, the first phone call, the first letter, the first reach out, although certainly it can apply to that. But it's every time you begin a phone call, every time you begin an email, every time you begin a meetup in person. And for some people, those happen on a regular basis. That might be a weekly thing for you. For other people, it happens once a year. For others, it might be 5 years. I've met plenty of people who might have had email or phone contact with family members, but didn't actually meet in person for 5 or 10 years or even longer. So everybody's story is so different. So for me, when I think about the G for Genesis, it's about beginning with intention, whatever it is that you're entering at that moment in time. For the reconnection, I think it's so important. We're looking at the bigger picture of reunion as we're talking about reconnecting with family, particularly for those of us who are adoptees. We are reconnecting with our family of origin. But I think it's true for all triad members, for adoptive parents, for first and birth parents, that it's really about connecting with yourself. Who am I? What are my values? What matters to me? What's important to me? Because if you're going to connect with other people, you need to make sure you're really clear and true about who you are. And we don't always know that. And I can certainly say that as an adoptee, who I was before I met Kathy and Roger, my birth parents, and who I was after. I mean, there was a very clear demarcation point in terms of my identity. I remember that first time meeting Kathy in person, which was only 2 weeks after I called her for the first time back in '99. And I felt like our DNA was downloading to each other. It was like 29 years of, this is what happened. And so it was like, I felt my whole body getting rewired. I don't know, maybe some of you can relate to that. If any of you can relate to that, write that in the chat. I'd love to hear that. So I think that reconnecting with yourself, one of my practices and traditions is I'm a shamanic practitioner, as well as being a life coach. And one of the things we talk about is soul loss. And certainly anybody who is separated by adoption is going to experience some kind of soul loss, and through that lens and through that tradition. So reunion then helps us with healing that soul loss and with calling those lost soul parts back home to ourselves. So the reconnection is with ourselves. It certainly is with the other people, getting to know them and who are you, and, what makes you tick and what makes me tick, and, how do we fit into each other's lives, sort of these puzzle pieces. But I also think there's a third piece that I haven't heard as much talked about in the adoption community, but it's that reconnection with spirit. And when I say spirit, I'm saying capital S, like God or a higher power as you know and understand that for you. That's not coming from any particular religious dogma, but it's what is your understanding of sort of the universe and how it works. And, so many of us have so much trauma. And yet, so many of us are also incredibly resilient, right? We have developed resilience and strength and courage and discernment and, all the things as a result of our trauma and as a result of the challenges that we've had. And so I think of that as sort of a higher, spiritual calling. It was like, oh, that was part of my soul's curriculum when I came in. Like, oh, I had to learn these things. Now, do I wish I could have learned them a different way? Absolutely. I'm not saying that. But so I think that there's lots of different levels of reconnection. And, as I continue to develop out this framework, I'll be sharing more, and I'll be writing about it in the book too. So the A, let's move on to the A for authenticity. Hold on, I want to look in the chat here. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything that's relevant at the moment. We need to be proud of ourselves for the courage it takes to reach out for a reunion. Yes. Oh my gosh, Susan, I'm so glad that you said that, because it requires insane amounts of courage to do that. Not only to be the one who initiates, but also to be the one who receives. Whether it's an adopted person looking for their first family, or if it's the other way around, it takes real courage to say, yes, I want this. I remember the first time my birth dad called me. So I met my birth mom first. She called my birth dad for me that weekend. Well, the way it went was she showed me her yearbook pictures, and she said, oh, there he is. We went to high school together, and, isn't he cute? I was like, yeah, he's totally cute, which is a weird thing to say about your dad, but whatever. She said, well, if you want me to contact him, I can. And I said, oh, well, how is that? She said, well, he works for my cousin. She said, I haven't talked to him in 30 years. I haven't talked to him since I told him I was pregnant with you, but I can call him. So when she called him, and then he called me a couple weeks later after he had sort of done his own, reckoning with his wife and his parents and with his minister and, all the things that he needed to go through with his personal process. And I remember when he called me, he said, well, what do you want? And I said, I don't know. And he said, well, I don't know either. And I said, how about we just take it one day at a time? And so I think that speaks, Susan, to that idea of courage. Like it takes courage on the parts of both parties, in the case of two, or all parties. Maybe you find out that you have siblings and you didn't know that you had them. It takes courage for those folks to step up and say, yeah, wow, there's another one of us. Okay, how are we going to figure that out? And then let me just say, Teresa, what did she say? I say my DNA relaxes when I'm around my birth family. And my mom said, yes, I would totally agree with that, Teresa. And I love that feeling of sinking into them. I have a couple big brothers. So I have 6 brothers and 5 sisters. And all my brothers are like these big men, like one's a cop and one's a Marine. And so I just love it when they just come up and give me these big bear hugs. I agree. The DNA just kind of goes, it settles down. Yeah, it's really good. Okay, I'm going to keep going then here. So, because I want to make sure we get to questions and whatever. So we've gone through Genesis and reconnection. So then authenticity. I think certainly as an adopted person myself and witnessing others, that's one of the really hard ones, right? Because we spend so much of our lives feeling like we don't belong. And where do we fit? So we kind of are wearing a mask. Like, who are you? I don't know about you all, but I had so many friends when I was in probably high school and then in college, they would say, you know, what we see here is very different than who you are when we get to know, you know, when we get to know you over time. And I didn't really have words for it so much back then, but now I understand that it was about safety. It was about putting myself out there, and it wasn't safe to be fully me. So there was always sort of this mask, or this, you know, you have to like get past the gatekeeping. And then once I got to know you, and once I felt like I could trust you, then maybe you would see, you know, this other part of me. So I think in reunion, the authenticity um, is showing up and being yourself, but it's also about being honest and authentic about the situation that got us all here in the first place. You know, it's about, you know, biological parents being able to tell their true story about what happened and how challenging it was. And the same is true for adoptive parents. You know, how did they end up in a place where they ended up adopting? You know, and how can we be real and honest and true? I mean, the system as we know it is built on secrecy and lies, right? That's how it all got started all those years ago. And, you know, we're working on untangling that, and we're working on openness and authenticity and truth. But yet it's still not there. You know, I know people who, you know, have chosen not to tell their children that they're adopted. Even in this day and age. I'm like, really? Yet it's still happening out there, which is why we need to keep having these conversations. So the authenticity is just really, really think, oh, the chameleon. Yes. And oh my gosh, that is such, I love that. Have y'all had Lorraine on here? Yeah, Lorraine Gerald. Yeah, she's one. I love what she's doing out there for educating people. Yes, and she's the adopted chameleon for those of you who don't know. Yeah, and we get really good at being chameleons too. It's almost, I don't know about y'all, for me, it was kind of a source of pride. Like, well, you don't know the real me, you know. And, you know, now I'm working on letting that go. In my 50s, right? You know, this is a lifetime of work. This is a lifetime of work that we all get to do. So then I want to move on to C. So the C in grace is about communication. And this is good for any relationship, of course, but it's especially critical when you're navigating reunion that you've got to be clear with your communication. You need to be talking about, you know, what are your expectations? What are mine? How are we going to communicate? I mean, it's such a simple thing, but I know somebody who has been in reunion. This is a mother who relinquished, and she's been in reunion with her daughter for a couple of years now. And there's been some real challenges with them because of their expectations and desires about how they want to communicate. You know, one wants to only do emails, the other prefers phone calls. You know, one wants to meet in person, and they did one time, but then the other one was like, oh yeah, that didn't feel really good. So instead of having an easy flow about how they're going back and forth, there's these fits and starts, and then there's confusion and uncertainty. Well, what did they mean, and why are they being quiet, and why haven't I heard from them in 2 weeks? And I think, you know, that happens often in reunion, right? That people, maybe they start off, you know, we're in that honeymoon phase in the early weeks and months and even years. And so you think, oh, you know, I'm going to respond right away and I want to learn. And then as time goes on, and, you know, people get married and divorced and they have kids, and you have work and health stuff and, you know, whatever, like life happens. And then the communication is less frequent, or there are lags in response time. And so I think it's so important when you are in reunion with people, and this is just good practice in everyday stuff, but to talk about your expectations. Be like, hey, if I don't get back to you within 24 hours, it doesn't mean that I don't care. It just means that I'm really swamped right now. Or, you know, I know you really want to talk on the phone, but because I've got, you know, 3 little kids under the age of 5, was not me, but, you know, it could be for somebody, to say, you know, I can really only email you back at, you know, 9 o'clock at night after I've put the kids to bed, because that's my only quiet time that I get for myself, you know? So whatever the situation is, it's really important to talk about expectations, how you're going to communicate. And then when you are communicating, to be really clear about what you want, what you need, what you hope for. I have seen so many people have just such heartbreaking miscommunication. Um, and it wasn't because people didn't want to be connected. It was because were not they were not fully explaining themselves to the other person, and what was being received was misinterpreted or whatever. So I think a lot of times too, it's important, like say what you mean and mean what you say, and then follow through on it. And then if you don't, be good about reparation. You know, it's just like, you know, if you've raised children, I remember I would get really angry at my daughter when she was a toddler, because toddler, like the tantrums and the and I was having a hard time self-regulating, and so I would yell at her. And then the next morning I would go back, and this wasn't when she was like 2, but when she's like 5, I would go back and say, you know what, Mommy got really mad at you last night, and I am so sorry. That was not right of me, and I apologize. And here's how I was feeling, and here's why I handled it that way. And then she would come back, even as a 5-year-old, and say, oh, well, thanks for telling me that, Mommy. And this is what was happening for me. And I was amazed that I could have that level of conversation with a 5-year-old. But it's true, like repair and just acknowledging when you screwed up goes a really long way. So I think it holds true in adult relationships too. I mean, you can never expect perfection in any relationship, and you've got to go into it knowing that you're going to screw up. But the key is being able to talk about it and say, you know what, I screwed up. And you also get to, and that goes back to the bravery that we were talking about early. It's okay for you to say, hey, you didn't handle that really well. We made plans to get together, and then you changed them at the last minute. And that was really hurtful and stressful, or, whatever it was for me. And we need to get to a place of safety where we can say that to other people. I remember my birth mom, this kind of relates to authenticity as well as communication. But one time she was talking about all of her grandchildren, and she shared a number of how many grandchildren she had that was inaccurate by my count, because she wasn't including my adopted daughter, and she wasn't including her step grandchildren. So she was only counting her biological grandchildren. And that was so painful for me. And I was terrified to confront her about it, because I was like, oh my God, she's going to hate me forever. She's going to go away. But I got the courage to do it. And, I worked through it with my therapist. Like, how am I going to talk about it? And we had this really honest conversation. And the way I was able to frame it, because I'm an adopted person myself, I was able to say, how do you think that would have felt if my mom and dad, if my grandparents had talked about their grandchildren and not included me in the grandchildren count? And she kind of went like, what? She's like, oh, that would be horrible. I said, that's what you've just done, unknowingly, unwittingly. And she was like, oh my God, Elizabeth, I never thought about it that way, which was really powerful. And it was really healing for both of us, to be able to do that. So again, I think that's where all that courage comes into. Okay, and then I'm going to stop talking after this last E. So the E is evolution. And Marcie, you really alluded to it at the beginning when you said it evolves, it changes, it's fluid. And we're not just talking about one person, right? Like, a lot of times there's a focus on the adoptee and the first mother, but then you've got first dad, you've got adoptive parents, you've got siblings, you've got spouses. You've got grandparents. I remember when we met Riley's birth dad, and then met his mother, so Riley's maternal biological grandmother, the first time, and she was just so sweet and so loving, and she got very emotional, and she just said, thank you for sharing her with me, with us, I think is how she said it. She said, thank you for sharing her with us. And my response was, but why wouldn't I? Yeah, and yet that would be the expectation of some people, like, oh, well, I don't, do we have the right to, and, my approach is like, the more family to love you, the better, if it's healthy and if it's safe. And as we know, that's not the case for everybody. So I'm not talking about those situations where it's not, but there's enough love to go around for everybody. If a mama can love more than one kid, why can't a kid love more than one parent? Or grandparent or whatever. So I think the evolution part is so key to look at in individual relationships and the group dynamic. And then it shifts over time. Like, I look at my siblings. So I told you all I have 11 brothers and sisters. So I was 29 when I met them. My youngest sister was 3 at the time. And my oldest brother would have been 22 at the time. And now they are all, not all, but a good majority of them are married and have children of their own. And because I was a late parent, I didn't become a parent until I was in my 40s, and some of them became parents in their 20s. Now we suddenly are able to have a different relationship because we can find common ground on parenting. But when I was 29, I had a 3-year-old sister. She was cute and adorable and fun, but, totally different life experience. But now, she's a mama. She's getting ready to have her second baby, actually, I think next month. And, so we're able to find more common ground with one another. So that's how those relationships have shifted, which has been really joyful. And they'll continue to evolve over time. So, okay, so I'm going to stop there because, Marcie, I'm sure you have questions, and, we can open it up whenever you're ready.
Okay. Yeah, well, I want to thank you for sharing with us this evening. Like I said, I'm looking forward to the book, and I love the grace method. I think that can be helpful for all of us. And I was just sitting here thinking, just like on the E, you can be in a reunion, say it's the first mom and the adoptee, and you're communicating and you have understanding and expectations, and it's moving smoothly, right? But all it takes is one outside party, okay, just to change all of that. So you think you've got it down pat and you're working it, you've got a great relationship and it's moving forward, but it just takes one opinion. It just takes one person to say something, one person not to show up, one person to make an assumption, just to upset that whole relationship. It's so fragile, so fragile.
So true. Well, and that word assumption is so key, Marcie. I remember my dad used to say, in fact, someone on Facebook asked the other day, they said, what's a piece of advice that you remember from your dad? And my dad always used to say, don't assume. You make an ass out of you and me, Elizabeth. Don't assume. And it's so true, though, in reunion, right? We make these assumptions about other people or what they say or what they don't say or how other people are going to think or feel. And they're so not true. As one of my friends likes to say to me, it's not always about you, Elizabeth. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. It's not.
So let's talk a little bit about, before we go, we've got a few minutes before the hour.
Good.
So I just wanted to ask you a little bit more of your personal story with
Sure.
all those siblings. So tell us about that. Like, it is, okay, you might have a favorite sibling there, or one at least that you communicate with more so than another. And how do you navigate that many brothers and sisters? What does that
Well,
look like?
yeah, and that's a great question. The reality is, I don't have super close relationships with all 11 because that's like impossible. I mean, I got my own super busy life. And there are some that I'm a little bit closer to and that I communicate with more regularly. But the others that when we do get together in person, it feels just really easy and really natural. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely different. And that's also changed over time. When I was younger and none of us were parents, that was one dynamic. And I was sort of like, the big sister who was, off doing my own thing. And, they were all still at home, with their parents being raised, and I was off, and running a business and doing all the things I was doing. Whereas now, they all have careers and families. And so there's a lot more common ground there. I would definitely say I've gotten a lot closer to my three siblings that my first mom raised since she died. And that's been really fascinating because what I realized that I was unaware of, and you kind of touched on this earlier, is that every time I would go visit them, because they all lived near each other, I was always focused on my mother because I wanted to spend time with her. And I loved being with my siblings, and we would do group things together, but it wasn't the focus. And now that she's gone, I'm like, oh, what had I been missing all along? And so now, when the four of us get together, it's extra special. So I'll share something about that. So last summer, so she died 2 summers ago, 2 Mays ago. Last summer, we made a decision, the four kids, for the first time ever, we went on vacation together with our families. So we brought partners and children, and we rented a lake house in upstate Georgia. They're in Florida and I'm in North Carolina. So we met in Georgia. It was one of the best vacations of my life because I was related to everybody there, and like, and we come from such different backgrounds in terms of like how we were raised and our life experiences and, politics and just like all the things. But just being with them and in their presence and with all my little nieces and nephews running around and playing games, and it was just so incredibly healing. And they said too, they're like, this was one of the best trips we've ever had, for us all to be together. So it took Kathy's death to really bring the four of us together. So it's one of those, silver linings in a really tragic situation. On my birth dad's side of the family, love all of those kids. One of them in particular, I have a brother who is not married, and he has this jet set lifestyle. He's a lighting tech and he works for all these like big name musicians. So he literally travels all around the world. And so he has more time freedom and flexibility to come visit than the other kids do who, have kids and whatever. So I've been able to build a special bond with him because he has more time. So yeah, so to answer your question, I mean, it certainly is different, and there's no way I could possibly, have regular contact with all 11. It would just be too hard.
Let's,
Oh, Marcie. Oh yeah, you're muted.
oh, yeah.
Oh, wait, I want to see, wait, there's a couple questions here. Can we look here too?
Go ahead.
Oh, bye, Jean. Oh, she probably left already. Yes, Julie says small thing can upset the equilibrium, and then the relationship is called to evolve. Yes, exactly. Right. Like sometimes it's almost an invitation to like, oh, what's next now? I love that. Susan asked me, did your siblings know that you existed before you found your first parents? No, they did not. And it's really funny to hear them tell it. My siblings from my mom's side, she called a family meeting, I guess the day I called her, and they were like, oh my God, we were afraid she was calling to tell her she was pregnant. And then, and they were like, oh, pregnant a different way, mom. Like, ah. And then with my birth dad's family, they kind of had to tell the kids one at a time because they were young, 3 to 17. So that was a different experience. But no, they didn't know. And then Teresa, I just spent the weekend. Oh, yay. Here at Lake Placid, went to Santa's workshop. Oh, and you're gonna do a ritual every year. I love that, Teresa. That's awesome. Yes. And those are the kinds of things that we want to be doing, is that making memories together. And we're building our collective memory bank together. That's so important. That's great. Okay, sorry, Marcie. I just wanted to address some of those.
Oh no, you're fine. Okay. Yeah, it's just about 8 o'clock. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recorded portion now.
Actually, wait, before you do that,
Okay.
will people be able to see the chat
Yes, they can see the chat.
in the recorded stuff? Because I want to make sure that I put my contact info in there for everybody. If anybody,
And your links to your book.
Oh, so one thing I didn't put in there, I didn't put the link to the book, but I'll just write the book name and you can just look it up. And you can find the book on my websites actually. So it's on both of my websites, but it's not a direct link to Amazon.
And you did have your contact information there. So if people want to reach out to you personally, the best way to contact you. Okay.
Yeah, I just put it in the chat there. Yeah, I put my website, my email. Come follow me on socials. I'm really in transition with my business, and I'm going to be doing a lot more in the adoption space, and particularly around reunion. And I'll be teaching a couple classes. I've got some speaking engagements coming up. I'll be speaking actually at the Adoption Knowledge Affiliates Conference in November. I'll be doing a 90-minute training on the GRACE method. So would love to invite you all to join me for that. So,
okay. Anything else before we close the recording side of this? Okay. All righty. Let's do that.